All right, let's get started. So, when I look at solving this, what would be the most appropriate method? Um, it's going to be pretty easy to isolate this perfect square here and use the square root principle, right? There's no use using quadratic formula or something like that. But we could use probably any method, but I think that's the most appropriate. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2. I could do that, or divide everything by 2. So I have x squared minus 64 equals 0. And then I can isolate the perfect square, use the square root principle, right? So we'll go ahead and use the square root principle. I'm going to square root both sides. So that's plus or minus the square root of 64. So x equals plus or minus 8. All right, what would be the most efficient way to solve this one? Again, I think just like in the first question, we can isolate this perfect square here. If we were to expand this, multiply by 3, subtract 27, see if we can factor it, I think that's just unnecessary. So and we're going to see right away when we divide both sides by 3, okay, that's going to make things a lot easier. So now I have isolated already perfect square. We can use the square root principle, and 9 is a perfect square. So take the square root of both sides. Okay, so I'm going to square root this side, plus or minus square root of 9. So a minus 25 equals plus or minus 3. So a is equal to 25 plus 3 and 25 minus 3. So it would be 22, 28. All right, so we have a trinomial that's set equal to 0. Can we factor? This is a simple trinomial. So we know that the leading coefficient is 1, so we have x and x. Product of 77 is pretty easy because there's only one product. It only splits into 7 and 11, right? Those are both prime. So which one would be negative? Must be, since this is negative, be negative 11 plus 7 equals 0. Let's just check that. So we multiply x squared plus 7x minus 11x. That's negative 4x. And then we know that's plus or minus 77. All right, so either x is equal to, what would make this 0? If x was 11, or if x was equal to negative 7. All right, so slightly complicated, but because the constant's only 2, that makes it a little bit easier. So let's see if we can factor this. Well, this is a prime, so it has to be 5z and z. And 2 is also prime. So we know it has to be 1 and 2 if it's going to work at all. If not, then I might use completing the square or quadratic formula to solve. Okay, so 1 and, so if this is the 2 here, that's going to be 10 and then plus 1. That will work, right? Let's just check that. 5z squared plus 10z plus z is 11z plus 2 equals 0. Okay, so that's good. So what would make this equal to 0? I could go ahead and say, well, 5z plus 1 equals 0. 5z equals negative 1, so z equals negative 1/5. And then this one's pretty easy to say, negative 2, right? All right, this one kind of looks like it would be pretty easy to factor. If we think about factors of 20, we got 4 and 5, so we could have, 10 and 2, or 4 and 5. Just trying to think, how can we make that have a sum of negative 10? Don't think we can do that, so it doesn't look like it's factorable. So let's go ahead and let's just practice quadratic formula, okay? So we know the quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus, we don't have to memorize this, but b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And if we end up having a negative inside the square root, then we can stop there because we know that there's no solution to this. All right, so let's try that. So we have 10, because negative, right? Plus or minus, okay, so 100, because negative 10 squared, minus 4 times a, times c. Right? Let me look at 20 all over 2. Keep going. So we have 10 plus or minus, let's see, inside the square root, it's going to be, this is going to be plus 80, right? So it's going to be 180 all over 2. So if I simplify the square root, okay, so that's 10 plus or minus, and what's a perfect square that factors out of here? Well, 9 does. So 36. So it's square root of 36 times the square root of 5 all over 2. So that's 10 plus or minus 6 root 5 all over 2. And these simplify here. So it's 5 plus or minus 3